What made you become aware of your own intensity and the collateral damage of that?
Yeah, I think this is a good point because although I would say I'm more balanced now, I certainly haven't always been. And I
Right.
think the pandemic was a reset for me in a big way because suddenly I couldn't go anywhere. And I had all these consecutive nights at home in a way that I really never had before. And I noticed how I was more productive, but I was also more present. I was more happy. I was less anxious. My relationships got better. And so as I've sort of come out of that, I've tried to be much more balanced. But it can be very easy when you are successful in the professional sphere for everything to kind of pivot around that. What does Ryan need to be successful? What does Ryan need to function at his best? And what's sort of obscured by all that is the cost that little kids pay for this, that your spouse pays for it, and also what you yourself pay for it, right? I think it's been helpful for me having kids because I realized I was always willing to commit to one more thing, to add, one more, straw on the camel's back, because I was always willing to bear the cost. But when you can see the effect that has on someone else, like when you say yes to something because you don't want to be rude to someone, what's obscured is the other people that you're being rude to because now you're gone, because now you don't have any energy, because now you're late or whatever it is. And so it's been helpful for me as I've tried to become more balanced, as I've tried to be aware of how, my decisions affect other people. It's just forced me to be more disciplined and forced me to be more considerate. Um, and that's been, yeah, it's been a journey.
But usually something sparks that.
Yeah,
Usually,
usually,
usually somebody says, you know what, I don't want you doing this anymore. Or, you know what, this isn't working for me. Or, you know what,
yes,
you're a narcissist or you're something or other, and you
yes.
have to pay attention to. So you wrote all this, which I thought was great, and it caused you to put this on hold, and it caused you to think of, which so often people think of after some big
Yes.
event. What made you think about this?
Yeah, I've been with my wife since we were 19, and so we've known each other forever. And obviously our relationship has changed and evolved over the years. And it's kind of, my success didn't come overnight. And so
Right.
it sort of creeped up on me, right? And I realized I think it creeped up on us. And so as we've tried to adjust and adapt and also take in what's happened, we just had a lot of conversations about what do we want our lives to look like. And I remember we were talking one day and I was sort of complaining about how hard it was for me, how tired I was, the burdens that were on me, all the things that I was doing. And my wife said, yeah, but you understand that it's your dream, right? She's like, my dream is not your dream, you're getting the reward of people recognizing you for it, appreciating you for it, thanking you for it. And she was just sort of pointing out the sort of hidden costs of all of the things that I've done. And that really struck me, the idea that yeah, it's been no walk in the park for me, but I get the rewards of it. And just thinking about both both the pros and the cons of it and how that gets spread out. And you know, I, so I did this book on justice, and I think when we think of justice, we think about whether something's legal or not, right? We
Right.
think about whether something's commonly accepted or not. I think a better definition of justice is really just thinking about how your choices and decisions affect other people. What's the fairness? What's the impact? What's the load that gets carried by others? And so I obviously, as I'm thinking and writing about this, I wanted to think about it and act on it in my own life also. And so that's where I think a lot of those changes came from.
Why'd you put that at the afterword instead of in the foreword?
So I've been working on this series now for 5 years on the
Yeah.
cardinal virtues, and I wanted to talk about courage, and I wanted to talk about self-discipline, and I want to talk about wisdom, and of course justice, and mostly I wanted to talk about much more powerful and well-known examples other than myself. But I
Right.
also felt if I'm going to encourage other people to do these things, I have to hold myself accountable to them also. So I didn't want to be in the forward because I felt like it was making it about me when I don't see myself as a particularly powerful example of any of these virtues. But then at the end, I wanted to kind of give myself a report card and not spare myself, you know, the high standards that I'm trying to talk about in the book.
I love that. I love that you did that. It made it personal. And I think you kind of really very well kind of talked about justice, not in, as you said, not in the legal sense or the highfalutin sense, but in the terms of decisions we make day to day. And so, as all
Yeah.
of you know, Ryan has done this series on the Stoics, and this one, Right Thing, Right Now, is about justice. And I love it begins by really talking about Harry Truman. And I must say, even though I was an American Studies major, a big history buff, I didn't know a lot about what you wrote about Harry Truman. And what an extraordinary man he was, pre-presidency, president, and post.
Yeah.
And was that something that you were like, people need to know who this man was, and this is a life that's not one that when we talk about great man, he doesn't pop up, right? You don't hear
Yeah.
people spew him off, but it was really, I thought to myself, wow, what a man.
Yeah, that was the exact reaction I had to him. There's kind of two presidents where the more you study them, the more you like them as people, and I'd say those are Harry Truman and Jimmy Carter. Whether you agree or disagree with policy decisions they made, um, it's indisputable that they are two of the best human beings to hold that job, and I think that's an interesting. We tend to rank presidents based on, how much of their agenda did they get passed? How did they do on the world stage? Did they win re-election or not? Um, did they prove themselves worthy of the weight of the office as human beings is kind of a different question. And in its own way, it's almost more awe-inspiring. There was a black usher or butler in the White House who served like 5 or 6 consecutive presidents, and he said, Harry Truman was the only president who spoke to me like a human being, who saw me as a person. And look, were there more dazzling and brilliant presidents? Sure. Were there more astute political actors? Probably. But that counts for something too. And I think what I was so struck by both with Carter and Truman is, yeah, just the fundamental decency. And power is supposed to corrupt, right? Power is supposed to change a person. And so when you have someone like Harry Truman, who's kind of this regular guy from the middle of the country, probably the last president to not go to college. He's still paying off debts from a failed business he's a senator. If he is changed at all by the White House, it's because it makes him better. And what an incredible sort of statement about someone's character.
Yeah, and also like when you mentioned Carter, the way he has lived his life post
Yes.
president has been even more, I think, awe-inspiring to people of all political parties, right? Just his humanity on display. And that doesn't seem to be something that culture is rewarding, particularly right now. And yet,
Yeah.
here's your book, which I thought was so interesting. It catapults right to number one. It's right there, right here, right now, talking about this very thing that doesn't seem to be rewarded right here, right now. So, what does that tell you? Does it tell you that people don't know how to, they don't know what it is, that the press is missing it, that people, what is the insight that we're all missing?
I have to say, I was pretty surprised by that. I went in to my publisher when I sold them these 4 books, and I said, "This will be the worst selling book of the series. Let's just say that up front. I think it's going to be the hardest sell. I think," and it was honestly, I do think one thing I struggled with the book is I think justice is important,
Yeah.
but what does it say about our society that when people hear that word, they kind of go like, no, thanks, not interested. They think the legal system,
Yeah.
or, today now we have this pejorative, you might call someone a social justice warrior, which means they're annoying, or they virtue signal, or they're unrealistic. You know, it was an interesting insight as I kind of looked at different books in the category, as I talked to people about it, to go, okay, the hardest part of this project is going to be to write a book about justice and not have justice in the title, because if I do, it's probably dead in the water. And
Yeah.
so to think about how, yeah, when you talk about justice, people tune out, but when you talk about doing the right thing,
Yeah.
we all agree that that's important. And so it's
But do
kind of
we
interesting.
do it? But that's what I'm curious about, because definitely when you read Ryan's book, and this isn't the first one I've read, but you're reading this, and I'm like, yeah, 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 and then I go to the news, and I'm like, no, no, no. It seems to be in direct opposition to the way to what we are rewarding.
That's
To
certainly that's certainly true. I think we have to remember that by definition, the people we hear the most about
yeah,
uh, want it that way. And the people that we don't hear about, most of the fundamentally decent things, you think about a truly selfless person, they don't do something selfless and then go, hey, why aren't you recognizing myself here? Right. And so much of what's good and decent and wonderful and kind in the world is never going to get the attention or the recognition that it deserves, because it's in a battle against egotism and self promotion and the desire for recognition and rewards. So yeah, I think we have a if you're simply judging, the world by what you're seeing in the news or what you're seeing in social media, it's not going to be representative. And I think this goes to what you were saying earlier. Why we want to stay out or above the noise is that it's not an accurate depiction of reality. It's not representative of your fellow human beings and what's important. And so you kind of got to create your own, sources of information, your own sort of shrine of what values and people you want to be hearing about, or you're just going to be hearing about the worst things people have done to each other on loop without end.
yeah, and I think that's a very dangerous loop that everybody's on, which is why I thought the book right now is so important, because it shines a light on that these people do exist. They've existed in the past. It can exist in us. To me, it was really a call to each of us at any age and at every age, and to our children, to like, be this type of person. And I was talking about it at the table, and somebody at the table said, but that's not what's being valued out there. So like, why are you talking about this and telling us to be this, when what looks like success is something completely the opposite?
Yeah.
And I said, that's why I'm going to get you the book and you're going to read the book. But I think it's a really interesting, because I tried to say to him, that's why it's important to read books, first of all. That's why it's important to know who other people are in history. It's why it's important to ask these questions of ourselves, because at the end of the day, even if somebody looks like they're cheating the system and doing well, we each have the opportunity, as you're saying in here, to do the right thing right now.
Yeah. And look, we can't be naive about it.